morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Do my eyes deceive me, or is that Niall Stanage in the chair?
I am delighted to be back with you, Robby.
Not a hologram?
No, we don't go with the CNN route. With their one use of the hologram. I'm back live and in person, and I'm glad to be with you. How are you?
I am doing just fine.
Excellent.
I'll leave it at that. Just
yes.
fine.
Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll expand more on issues of the day, Robby, in your radar. What is on your radar today? I
have a feeling we're not going to disagree very much on this one. It's a very serious topic. Now, it's not only my friends on the left who are concerned about the plight of the innocent civilians in Gaza. Former Representative Ron Paul, a libertarian Republican revered by non-interventionists like myself for opposing war and speaking out against some of the actions of the Israeli government, is slamming those in the U.S. who are evincing indifference to the suffering of the Gazans. Worse than indifference, at least one member of Congress even indicated he supports the starvation of the Gazans. That's contemptible. Here's Dr. Paul speaking out.
Summarizing what you said about the hostages, release the hostages, the way I would phrase that, do what we say, or, and these are the results, you're going to starve the little ones, and it's hard for me to accept that as a basic principle. So the people in this country, they surely ought to be at least thoughtful enough to look at both sides of this, to look at pictures like that and what's going on.
And here's a little bit more from Dr. Paul.
And the truth is, what happens in these countries, and a lot of bad things happen, and it happens with U.S. support. And that means morally we are responsible. And you say, oh, no, we didn't do it. I didn't vote for that guy and all that. But it's our country. It's our system. It's our military. It's our foreign policy. It's on and on.
Paul was reacting to a post on X by Representative Randy Fine, a Republican of Florida. Now, in that post, Fine wrote, quote, "Release the hostages, until then starve away." And then he added, "This is all a lie anyway. It amazes me that the media continues to regurgitate Muslim terror propaganda." Now look, I've seen it suggested that not all the images of Gazan children starving that have been circulating in social media are accurate. Isn't that beside the point? We know from multiple credible accounts that there is a serious risk of famine in the Gaza Strip, that the people there are in desperate shape, and according to Fine, that they should all starve because Hamas is still keeping hostages. Look, it should go without saying, but that is just an appalling moral outlook. If you are willing to starve thousands of innocent people in order to punish the terrorists hiding among them, where does your penchant for collective punishment and retaliatory violence end? We obviously would not apply this logic to ourselves. Evil actions on the part of our government would not justify the deliberate starvation of thousands of the American people. And as Dr. Paul points out in his video, it's not as if anyone is asking the American taxpayers to forcibly contribute to the aid of Gazans. What we are saying is that aid organizations should be allowed to operate in the Gaza Strip. People who want to help should help. Israel has bombed and bombed and bombed Gaza, crippled its infrastructure, killed thousands of people. At this point, the government of Israel bears some moral responsibility for what goes on there, for the suffering of the people there. The U.S. government cannot take the position that Israel is free to blockade the Strip and prevent willing aid organizations from distributing food to the people there. That's just unconscionable. Look, I share the goal of destroying Hamas, destroying them utterly, but the destruction of Hamas cannot come at any cost. This cost is too high, especially when the U.S. government will be treated as morally complicit given our ironclad support of Israel. Ron Paul is not the only Republican who thinks Randy Fine's stance on starvation in Gaza is evil. So too does a man named Aaron Baker. Baker writes on X, "I do not support starving children. I do not support punishing citizens for having the worst government in existence." Baker is pro-Trump, pro-Second Amendment, pro-free speech, pro-borders, pro-capitalism, pro-America first. He's a Republican, and he's actually running in the Republican primary against Randy Fine in 2026. Maybe Floridians should pay a little bit of attention to him.
Well, you're quite right that we don't disagree with much of that, but let me just say I think it is commendable that conservatives or people of a right-of-centre disposition are calling Israel out for some of this barbaric behaviour, really. Ron Paul, we just played the comments from Marjorie Taylor Greene, with whom I disagree on almost everything, has actually been forceful on this and even used the word genocide just within the past couple of days. Thomas Massey, one of your favourites from Kentucky, has been similarly critical. And, you yourself making that argument, I think, is useful. I've never been one to believe that the criticism of Israel in relation to its conduct in Gaza should or ought to be confined to the left. That seems a strange argument to me.
Yeah.
Yes, there are, I think, certain broad critiques of the state of Israel that are kind of rooted in pretty strong leftism, the whole settler colonial thing. Mm-hmm. But I also think that, I just have more... I give conservatives more credit than to imagine that being conservative would require you to support this forced starvation or the blatant, dropping of enormous amounts of ordnance on civilians.
Well, and the reaction to Randy Fine is, I think, an encouraging sign. He's getting a lot of criticism from the right for what he said, even from pro-Israel people. I saw reporting in the New Republic that AIPAC has apparently dropped its endorsement of him. When you've gone too far for AIPAC, that is saying something. This is far from a one-off Twitter post. It's not as if this is not in keeping with the rest of his commentary on this issue. He seems more obsessed with Israel occupying Gaza than anything. Again, he's a congressman for the U.S. than anything going on the home front. It's part of America first. Part of the Trump ethos is making sure the American government is taking care of American problems and not contributing to problems elsewhere. So it's been interesting to see him get, I think, a frosty reception for his just constant, ceaseless rhetoric about what's going on there. He actually has a challenger who's getting a little bit of attention for himself, at least.
Yeah, Randy Fine has tweeted or made remarks like this a lot, perhaps not quite to this extreme, but certainly very, very distasteful and hyperbolic and inflammatory remarks. And it is interesting, finally he is being called out for it, which I'm appreciative of and I think is worthwhile. I do think he kind of flew somewhat under the radar for a while in a way that would not have happened if an Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib had tweeted something equally inflammatory in the other direction. I think there would have been storms for days or weeks. But this apparent celebration of people being starved, I think that was... Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the people who called him out, and she doesn't exactly balk at fairly fiery tweets or comments.
And then he said, let them starve unless the hostages get released. And then it's just like the moral calculus of that. Like, I also want them to release the hostages, but we wouldn't apply that logic to us or to it can't be at any cost get the hostages released, no matter how what if we kill everyone else on the planet. There is a limit to it. I've reached my limit. I wish the Israeli government had felt that way as well. And then the idea that it's actually not happening, there's been images on social media. Then there was pushback to one of the images in particular that had a very malnourished child. And, the additional information is that child already has some kind of condition to make it so scrawny. And people were treating that like some kind of gotcha or victory. And I'm like, well, okay, but then the children who are ill for some other reason are the ones who are going to suffer the most or first in this kind of situation. Come on. We know there is tremendous suffering there. They've destroyed the entire area. They've blown up every building. They won't let aid in. So that proves nothing overall.
No, nothing at all. And I was amazed at some of the claims that were made as if it was exculpatory. The argument about that particular child was, he's got a pre-existing condition which malnutrition might have made worse. And it's like, and that, what? And that's okay?
What are we arguing about?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
unbelievable.
It's really bad. Well, we've got more reporting actually coming up on this.
Next up, President Trump is speaking out on what caused his fallout with Mr. Epstein. We'll be right back.
President Trump is shedding light on why his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein fell apart.
Trump says that Epstein took women who were working at his Mar-A-Lago spa, despite Trump telling him not to. Here is the president on Air Force One discussing the matter.
And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want them taking people. and he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again, and I said, out of here.
Trump also told reporters that some of these women whom Epstein allegedly took were young and mostly spa workers. Porter then asked the president whether one of those women was Virginia Giuffre. Giuffre was one of the most prominent Epstein accusers who unfortunately died by suicide in April. Here's Trump responding to the Giuffre question.
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
In regards to Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's former accomplice, she has offered to testify to Congress if she were granted immunity. The House Oversight Committee rejected that request, however, and Trump has said that he has the power to pardon Maxwell, but he claims he has not considered it.
So this made a lot of headlines yesterday. However, if you've been following the Epstein story closely, I believe this was already known, or it was at least already known that she worked at Mar-A-Lago. Maybe this is the first time Trump has acknowledged that she didn't just that she was poached effectively by Epstein. So this was in, I believe it was in 2000 or thereabouts. She had been, I was looking more into her history. She was a young girl. She was estranged from her family for a period of time. And then I think her dad was working at Mar-a-Lago, was working in the vicinity, and she had come back to live with him. And I believe it worked that he got her a job there. She was about 17. So remember, her accusations are not from when she was, they're accusations of forcible sexual misconduct or kind of forcing it on her that she should provide sexual massages to business people and people on Epstein's behalf. She was not, I don't think, underage at the time. She was, I think, 17. And then, I mean, it's an icky age range to be clear, but I think her accusations were not of it was just a forcible.
She was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell, or she says she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell from Mar-a-Lago, I believe.
Yes. So Trump's saying that he told Epstein that caused the falling out between them, which is kind of interesting. That stop taking our people, and then he did it anyway, and that she was one of the people. So then she goes and works for Epstein, doing spas, massages, sexual massages for Epstein and others. And then he sends her, I believe, abroad to some massage school type thing and then she doesn't come back from that. She escapes that way. She meets someone really quickly, gets married, I believe lives in Australia for a number of years, has kids, and has nothing to do with them. And then years later, when the authorities in the U.S. start looking into Epstein based on a tip from a different family of an underage girl, they get in contact with her. And Ghislaine Maxwell calls her and says, have you been talking to the authorities? Don't talk to the authorities. And that was like the first contact they'd had in years. Right.
And then she did become very prominent globally, not only because she came forward, but because it's her who's in the famous photograph with Prince Andrew of Britain. And then he, of course, was asked about that, and he made this sort of vague suggestion that it may have been a doctored photo, which I don't think, frankly, persuaded anybody, really. And he ultimately settled the case, settled legal action for an undisclosed but presumably very large amount of money.
Did you get Kate Middleton to do the Photoshop?
Oh, man.
Remember that photo? That was not a real photo.
I don't. It's all kind of fairly creepy stuff. In relation to the politics of it, I'm just somewhat surprised that Trump keeps talking about it, because he keeps giving fresh fuel to a story that I think we both agree does not do him any good.
I mean, I'm glad he was forthright there. He was asked a question, he answered. He said, yes, to the best I recall, it was 25 years ago, so forgive not remembering exactly what the timeline was, but he acknowledged she worked. Obviously, she made complaints against a number of prominent people. She recanted some of them. She said that Alan Dershowitz was among her abusers, an attorney for Jeffrey Epstein, who's a well-known commentator. We've had him on Rising before. We've interviewed him aggressively on Rising about those accusations. She recanted those. She never said anything about her time at Mar-a-Lago or about Donald Trump, so maybe he felt there's no reason to withhold any information about it. The Epstein issue, yes, does keep coming up. He's peppered with questions about it, and will continue to be because of the unhappiness with the base and the MAGA influencers from not getting what they want.
Yeah, you said, you said correctly that we knew that Virginia Giuffre had been recruited from Mar-a-Lago. That is true that that's not new information. I think in terms of the Trump politics side of the story, it's the fact that this is a new explanation for why he and Epstein fell out in the first place. Prior to the past couple of days, there'd been basically two versions of that put forward. One was that they'd had a falling out over pursuing a particular piece of real estate, which I think Trump had won, and that had apparently alienated them from each other. The other one was that Epstein had engaged in some kind of inappropriate behavior
at Mar-a-Lago
that had come to Trump's attention. One of the comms people at the White House claimed that, well, the reason they fell out was that Trump realized Epstein was being a creep. That seems to be changing now, or this seems to be a different version of that, where Trump's actual objection is Epstein sort of stealing his employees away. I just think that those shifting explanations really do keep raising more questions about, well, what exactly is going on here in the middle of a kind of suspicious story for Trump overall.
Yeah, that's true. This one has the ring of truth to it because it actually fits a fact. Like, we know she did work there, and we know she was recruited by Epstein to move to him. So there's a little bit more to establish that would be the reason, and also the way he was asked about. He didn't. I don't know. The way he was asked about it and the way he gave that answer seems plausible to me. So I accept that's what it is.
But if that's what it is, then the question is, well, why did they not just say that at the start? Why were they engaged in sort of promulgating these different explanations?
Yeah, the administration, the way they're handling the Epstein issue is just really, really bad at this point. People will study this later and go like, well, how did you let yourselves become so mired in answering these kinds of... Nobody wants to be stuck talking about Epstein, but they set themselves up for it because they overpromised and underdelivered. It's a textbook case of that. We've been talking about that, a lot, and it's impacting things. Joe Rogan has been furious about it. We're going to actually do a segment on that a little bit later in the show. So these questions are going to keep being asked until they cough up something that makes the base happy, or until they pound it out of the base that they're going to ask questions about this. The way maybe they did with like January 6th or something.
Right, and it doesn't say, the pressure may cool slightly because the House of Representatives and the building across from us is in recess now, but Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna are in this bipartisan push to actually force more information up. So by the time the House comes back in September, that may heat up again. In other news, another country could recognize an independent Palestinian state. Will this put any pressure toward a ceasefire agreement? We'll talk about that right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us on Rising.
Well, Great Britain shocked the world by announcing they may recognize a Palestinian state. Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced this will begin in September if Israel does not agree to a ceasefire. He also added that Hamas needs to release all remaining hostages and agree to have no governing power in Gaza. President Trump said he did not discuss this with Starmer. It's a change in stance from the UK. Starmer's facing political pressures from fellow Britons.
The UK could now join France with this recognition. French President Emmanuel Macron recently announced that his nation will recognize an independent Palestinian state. Also, Israel is condemning these moves, saying that they reward Hamas. This is coming at a time when growing malnutrition inside Gaza has sparked global outrage. This month alone, 63 people have been reported to have died from hunger. That includes 24 children under the age of 5. Aid has increased slightly in recent days, but humanitarian organizations say it remains woefully insufficient.
And I talked in my radar about that and how that's unacceptable. And, you can see the images there of people fighting for food in conditions, by the way, that are unsanitary, obviously. And, in addition to just starvation, there's concerns about health and hygiene and disease.
Sure.
Look, now the problem here that recognize a Palestinian state, but one that is not governed by Hamas, is a significant sticking point, because I would love to just wave a magic wand and have an independent Palestinian state that is not governed by Hamas, absolutely, but Hamas is not going to agree to that, right? That's the basic problem. So the little caveat he put in there, doesn't that kind of wreck the whole thing? right?
I think, well, I mean, I think it's a symbolic move, which I actually have different kind of reservations about. But it is a symbolic move, I think, in response to public pressure. And what it's about and why the Israelis don't like it is once you recognize Palestinian statehood, you're very explicitly recognizing the Palestinian right to self-determination, which Netanyahu doesn't wish to do. He is opposed to the so-called two-state solution. Now, the caveat that I have is different from yours in that Starmer is saying, we will do this. We will recognize a Palestinian state if Israel agrees to a ceasefire, if Israel allows, if Israel doesn't agree to a ceasefire, if Israel doesn't allow aid in, we will recognize a Palestinian state. And my argument would be very simply that Palestinian self-determination
deserve a state either way.
Yeah, it shouldn't be contingent upon Israel's behavior. Now, what shape the actual state takes, there's the whole division between the Palestinian Authority, which has a very puny autonomy in the West Bank, and Hamas in Gaza, and how it would actually all operate. Yes, those are legitimate concerns, but I think this is...
And those are some significant details to work out.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is the problem, because I certainly want the Palestinians to have a state, to have their own home, to be free from this brutal conditions they're living in. But Israel is going to take the position that we're not going to allow a neighbor to be created that is run by a terrorist government bent on destroying us that attacked us a year and a half ago or however long it was ago. That's just like reality. I don't really want to be responsible for dictating the terms of their government to them, but given that the government they had just attacked Israel, it is complicated. When I argue about, some people on the left will say it's so simple, it's morally uncompromising. Like, I don't see it that way. I think it's complicated and difficult. I think the Israeli government is very unreasonable in how it's handled this issue. But also Hamas is unreasonable in its goals and the amount of destruction and death it's willing to visit on its own people in order to stay in power. Yeah. So I don't know what can be done, but yes, ideally I agree that they deserve. I was always for a two-state solution. I support two states, but I don't support a state run by terrorists, obviously.
I mean, I just think, it is the principle of there being a Palestinian state and the Palestinians having the right to that state that I think is the important thing. And, more than 140 nations around the world already recognize Palestinian statehood. This is not some minority position. It's true that France was the first major European power to go there, but it's a widespread view around the world for good reason, I would say.
Next up, a House committee is reportedly probing the EU and the Biden administration over their alleged censorship pressure on Spotify. Stick around for that. The New York Post is first reporting that the House Judiciary Committee is investigating whether the Biden administration and the European Union pressured Spotify to censor speech.
Some conservatives have criticized Spotify for banning Steve Bannon from the platform. Spotify did, however, stand by podcaster Joe Rogan when he was catching heat for some of his COVID claims. The company said back then that cancelling voices would lead to a slippery slope.
Now, a source told the New York Post that the probe is more centered around the EU pressuring American companies to censor due to their own laws. Congressman Jim Jordan, in a letter obtained by the Post, wrote, "These foreign laws, regulations, and judicial orders may limit or restrict Americans' access to constitutionally protected speech in the United States. Indeed, that appears to be their very purpose."
As for Spotify, the committee is reportedly asking them to preserve all their communications with foreign governments and with the White House. Spotify confirmed to the Post that they had received that letter and would respond accordingly.
In his letter, Jordan alluded to an incident where former EU regulator Thierry Breton warned Musk in 2024 about complying with certain laws restricting so-called harmful content. Breton warned that Musk at the time he may have to crack down on harmful content to avoid potential spillovers into the EU. Breton wrote in part at the time, "We are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate, and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections."
The EU has laws like the Digital Services Act, which can result in fines to platforms up to 6% of their global revenue if they're found in violation. Similar laws pertain elsewhere in the world too. X, along with a conservative activist named Billboard Chris, for instance, successfully sued part of the Australian government.
In an ex-post, Billboard Chris had criticized a WHO appointee named Teddy Cook, a biological female, and referred to Cook as a she. The Australian government had ordered the tweet to be taken down, but ultimately failed in that effort. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that in the U.S., First Amendment protects you from government censorship of speech. First Amendment doesn't exist everywhere. Australia and the European Union have slightly different, in some ways substantially different policies. That
You and I have different philosophies in this matter, but
that I don't like as much. But wouldn't you agree? I guess tell me if you don't. Should the American government certainly should not pressure Spotify. Spotify can do whatever it wants. If it wants to not have Steve Bannon or Joe Rogan, it can do that, and we can be mad about it, or you can listen to some platform where they're available. If the company's freely doing it, that's fine, and then you can have whatever your opinion about it is. If the U.S. government is, the U.S. government can say, we'd rather Steve Bannon is not on the platform. Joe Biden can say that, and I think it's really bad, and it's coming up to the line of violating the First Amendment, but the Supreme Court said it doesn't explicitly violate the First Amendment. But then if you have a committee meeting and the legislators start saying, well, unless you take off Steve Bannon, we're going to change this aspect of liability law and regulate you and make it worse, then you start to get into First Amendment violating territory. Obviously, if you just come outright and say, we're going to require the platform to do it, that is violating the First Amendment. What the European Union did would violate the First Amendment, but they're not subject to the First Amendment, so They can do whatever they can do whatever they want within reason. I can still think it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly think it's pretty bad. That you definitely have that freedom.
Steve Bannon is a voice for restraint in foreign global conflict against Iran. I think it's better for us that he's on Spotify or whatever else.
He was not banned from Spotify for his voice of restraint on wars overseas. He was banned on Spotify for making threats against Anthony Fauci and Chris Wray, who he said that he would go further than Trump and he would get heads on pikes, naming those two guys, which is obviously a threat. It is obviously inflammatory language. Now, that's why he was banned. In relation to Jim Jordan's efforts, the thing that I find perplexing about it is Spotify is headquartered in Sweden, and the EU, as we both agree, I think, can make whatever laws the EU wishes to governing its own territory. So it's just not clear to me what Jim Jordan's issue is with that. If he wants to change American laws or complain about American practices in relation to Spotify or anyone else, he should knock himself out doing that. But to make an argument against a European-based company on the basis of what the European Union is ruling, it's not really any business.
Spotify is not, for that reason, Spotify is not the best example to use. I really do. I am annoyed by European regulators trying to tell American companies what their speech policy should be, like X, like Facebook. Spotify is not an American company, so it is a little bit different. I have to go back. You think heads on pikes is an inflammatory, we should take down? I mean, I want, if somebody says, I want Donald Trump's head on a pike, I don't think censorship czars should take that out or anything. I don't think that should... I don't think that's a threat of violence.
I'd put the heads on pikes was his exact phrase.
That's rhetoric of spice. It's
violence?
not even that spicy. I don't think it's.
I
guess that's a difference of taste. I don't think that's
we just have a different
evincing violence at all.
I thought that to use a bipartisan example, you remember there was the famous...
I've said I wanted someone's head on a pike like 10 times before breakfast.
Well, the woman who used to do New Year's Eve with Anderson Cooper, is that Kathy Griffin?
Kathy Griffin.
She did was it a New York Magazine cover where she had, this was during Trump's first term, where she had a Trump head, a bloodied head on the thing. I thought that was disgraceful. I'm glad that she lost her gig with CNN for that.
Yeah, we're different on different sides of it. I wrote for Reason magazine at the time that I opposed her losing her job for that. I think that was more because it had a physical graphic component that was worse because there was actually some like kind of fake blood on the head. It had I think that was more inflammatory, but I did not think she should lose her job over that. I mean, isn't this what what liberals are complaining about right now with Paramount and whether South Park will be allowed to keep criticizing Trump. We've been talking about that. I don't know if you saw the latest episode. Had like AI generated naked Trump in the desert, and I didn't think it was funny at all, and it was really gross. But they should do it.
South Park making fun of, among other things, Donald Trump's genitalia is very different from either Kathy Griffin appearing with a bloodied Trump head or Steve Bannon saying he wanted Anthony Fauci's head on a pike. One is a incitement to violence. One is mockery of a president.
It's a metaphor. It's using figurative language to describe how important it is to get real accountability for Dr. Fauci for potentially being responsible for a pandemic that killed millions of people.
I don't think putting anyone's head on a pike is a responsible or sensible or useful contribution to any kind of debate.
It's like when people say, bend the knee. It's hearkening back to kind of medieval, submit to the new regime. Not we very much disagree on that one.
As we often do on these.
I will not use this language in your presence.
Well,
Niall.
exactly.
I don't want to make you feel worried for your life.
Keep my safe space over here, Robby. We should say Mr. Bannon is back. He was banned for 5 years, but apparently Bannon's War Room is back on Spotify now, I believe. So there we go.
All right, comedian Bill Maher walking back some of his criticism of Donald Trump's tariffs. What he had to say on his podcast is next. More Rising right after this.
I would have thought, and I got to own it, that these tariffs were going to sink this economy by this time, and they didn't.
That is, of course, comedian and host of the Club Random podcast, Bill Maher, who appears to be backtracking on his early criticisms of President Trump's tariff policy.
In the past, Maher had called Trump's tariff-led approach to relations with China, quote, backwards, and even went so far as to suggest he was rooting for a recession just so Trump would realize this was not good and reverse course. But in a recent conversation with left-leaning commentator Brian Tyler Cohen, Maher admitted the disastrous effects he predicted would come from the tariffs just haven't come to pass. Take a listen to a little more of their conversation.
I remember along with probably most people, was saying at the beginning, by the 4th of July, the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty.
Meanwhile, President Trump is back in Washington after a trip to Scotland, where he signed his latest trade deal following the implementation of his so-called Liberation Day tariffs. The deal with the European Union sets tariffs on goods from Europe at 15%, just half the rate that Trump had previously threatened, and includes a pledge from Europe to buy more than $750 billion in American energy over the next 3 years.
But some Democrats in Congress are not so impressed. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer slamming the deal as, quote, fake. He points out that European leaders have admitted that the deal is not legally binding and that they have no control over whether or not the investments actually happen. I suspect this is going to be one of these ones where we have mixed feelings maybe on each side. I do think off the top it is fair for people on my side of the small desk to say that some of the predictions of absolute sort of apocalyptic collapse in relation to these tariffs have not happened. I also think that the counterbalance to that is the Liberation Day tariffs were threatened for about a week, during which the
economy did dive.
The economy did dive. The stock market lost about 1/8 of its value, and there was a real crisis, at which point Trump backtracked. So was the prediction wrong, or did Trump not actually follow through at the scale he had threatened? He certainly didn't follow through at the scale he threatened,
right.
So there we are.
Right, yeah, I saw, my dear friend Batya was also tweeting about, doesn't this prove that the supporters of tariffs were right? I saw Oren Cass saying that with Michael Schellenberger. we don't have the massive tariffs in place. Trump is out there negotiating trade deals with everyone, trying to bring the trade down. Maybe the market is seeing what Trump is doing, looking at the long-term picture and saying, okay, Trump's goal is to have trade deals, allowing for more trade and fewer tariffs with nations all over the world, and we're reacting positively to that.
Right.
At the moment in which it seemed most likely that we were going to have crippling tariffs, the economy was doing worse.
Right.
So I think it's almost, I like Bill Maher, I generally agree with him. I think it's almost the opposite of what he's saying. It's doing well because there was a reversal, of course, and the long-term plan, the idea that we're going to have permanent tariffs in order to cripple bringing foreign goods in and do everything here at home, that wing of the Trump thought lost. And tariffs are a negotiating tool to have better trade relations with everyone. That view won. And so the point of that is eventually to get to free trade. So the market's reacting favorably to that. Also, you can never say that, if the market's going like this with what the policy was, well, maybe if there was no tariffs at all, it would have been going like this. Just because it's doing well because the American economy is resilient, maybe it could have been doing even better if we'd never threatened tariffs in the first place. Or maybe not because they were just part of getting a favorable trade negotiations. But that's how I would address his comments there.
Yeah, and the other point is that we're just getting toward the end of a period of massive uncertainty about all of this, because there was that initial week of the Liberation Day tariffs when everything was pretty catastrophic, and then Trump backed off and there were supposed to be 90 trade deals in 90 days, which didn't happen. Now with the August 1st deadline looming on Friday, there's this rush to get agreements in place. They've got the EU one. Britain agreed a kind of framework a while back, and some other nations have done likewise. But to me, it seems at least as likely that companies or nations that have a net importing balance into the United States have thought over the past couple of months, well, let's just see where this settles first and then see, are we going to eat a slightly increased tariffs? Are we going to pass those on or not? The rate of inflation certainly has not risen to the level that some people thought, but it has in fact ticked up. It's ticked up by a few tenths of a percentage point over a couple of months. Does that continue? Does that accelerate now? That seems to me what the danger is. I just don't think the fundamental question of has Trump's approach to tariffs worked? I just don't think we have a definitive answer to that yet.
And then nothing makes me more insane. I want to pull out my hair. Sorry, I didn't.
At least you have the option of doing that.
Is when the White House or some Trump administration affiliated account was celebrating how much revenue the tariffs have brought into the government. People, that's taxes. That is the revenue that's generated. It does generate revenue for the government in terms of higher costs being passed on to us, the people buying the stuff. It's the exact equivalent of the U.S. government imposing a sales tax of something on goods and raising a bunch of money on that and saying, look at how much money we raise, yay! You are paying for it. I am paying for it. You are paying for it. Anyone buying things here is paying for it. If you want to make an argument that this is a better way to generate revenue for the federal government than taxes or property taxes or income tax, okay, whatever, we can have a discussion about what is the ideal way to raise money for legitimate government functions. That you think there's a lot of legitimate functions. I think there's just some government functions, but fine. The government has to raise some amount of money. We can have a conversation about what's the best way to do that.
Tax the rich, Robby, is the best way to do that.
That's what you think the best way is? But this is just a form of that. They're not raising money out of thin air. They're making it sound like this is all coming from foreign people.
Yeah.
We're raising money off of foreign people. No, the cost of the good, it's passed on to the American consumers, and so they're raising it from us. And that is a loathsome thing to be celebrating for those of us who think we're taxed enough already.
Yeah, well, it's also just the way it is spoken about suggests often that it is the foreign government who's sort of handing over money to the American government, or it's the president of the European Commission saying, here you go, have a few billion or trillion dollars. Like, that's not what's happening. It's a tax on trade, effectively. And that's where the
it's a tax saying, well, now this good costs this much, or they have to pay this thing, so then the seller raises the price of it by exactly that much to cover the difference, and then you pay more for it. So it's revenue generated indirectly by you, and that should really be kept in mind here.
I can't believe I'm going to be obtuse enough as to make a slightly Trump-friendly argument here, but to that point about the seller raises the exact value of it, don't you think there's an argument to be made that given the importance of the US market to a lot of importers into the US, they would eat some level of tariff without passing every cent of that tariff on to American consumers?
Maybe. I don't know. I think the evidence is, we'd have to refer to some trade economist on that, but I think what I've read about the analysis is they pretty much pass on the full cost exactly to the dollar amount. That markets are relatively efficient. I know some people on the left think it's just massive. If you look at the profit margins in many sectors of the economy, while a lot of people on the left like to imagine fat cats just making a hand over fist in all these different industries, the profit margins on food, on clothing, on a lot of things are very slim. They just don't have the room to eat some massive cost increase. So no, they pass that on. It's slim. They make a lot of profits because they sell a lot of things, but the profit on each individual item is very slight.
Yeah, I just think it is going to be interesting to see how inflation develops, particularly over the next, say, 3 to 6 months, and whether we will see that happening to an extent that I think could be pretty politically ruinous for Trump, because his approval ratings on inflation in particular are actually really quite bad.
He's going to insult Jerome Powell to his face until Jerome Powell deals with this.
Drops interest rates, we shall see. A controversial nominee appointed as a lifetime appeals judge by this decision has Democrats up in arms. Stay with us, you're watching The Hills Rising.
The Senate confirming a controversial nominee as a federal appeals court judge this week. President Trump's former lawyer, Emil Bove, getting just enough votes for the lifetime appointment, with the final tally being 50 to 49. He will serve on a U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. They hear cases from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware.
Democrats have been strongly against appointing Bove for this position. They've been citing allegations that he suggested the Trump administration could ignore the courts if judges tried to stop certain deportations. Democrats have also been highlighting his involvement in dropping the corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And if you remember, Democrats even walked out of his confirmation hearing earlier this month.
I know you are not a fan of this selection. You want to summarize again for our viewers why that is the case?
Yes, because I think that we have just confirmed to the bench somebody who doesn't really believe in the rule of law. I mean, Emil Bove's alleged argument, according to the whistleblower over the deportations, was that if a judge said you cannot deport people under the Alien Enemies Act, in this case, that the government should simply ignore them. That can't be the way the courts or the political system operates. It is, in my view, instantly disqualifying from anyone being appointed or confirmed to a judgeship. Then you have other things in Emil Bove's history, like, for example, him being at the tip of the spear in getting January the 6th prosecutors fired from the DOJ here in Washington, and the other sort of controversies that he has been involved in, all of which add up, in my view, to the idea that he is simply a henchman for Trump, that his qualification really is not to do with his legal record. It's to do with a kind of thuggish loyalty to Trump.
Yeah, look, I just call it as I see it. I have no particular interest in defending this individual. There's nothing in his record that specifically appeals to me where I say that, I really want this person to do this job. I think following the rule of law is good and important, and he should not have directed people to ignore the law. I would say that it has been reported that he did that. It is not known for certain, but it is definitely a bad thing if it happened. I don't know what else to say. It's not. I'm not. It's a right-left debate show, but I don't agree with everything.
No,
Right. right people want and think. I'm a libertarian, so it's not. I don't think you should just be automatically doing whatever the Trump administration tells you or that kind of thing.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I agree with that, and that's certainly the case with this show. But what I find perplexing is only 2 Republicans did vote against, and perhaps predictably it was Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. And Murkowski, in defense of her position, says, and I'm quoting here, "I don't think that somebody who has counseled other attorneys that you should ignore the law, I don't think that that individual should be placed on a lifetime bench."
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems like obviously correct to me. And the fact that only one of her Republican colleagues in the Senate backs that position, I find dispiriting and concerning for the future of the country.
Do you think Murkowski and Collins and others, they vote strategically to when they so they can dissent, but it still goes through, is what it seems to always be the case?
Well, I mean, they certainly don't get many other Republicans to support their position.
Yeah. But every time they have, sometimes it seems like when they do have one, then one or the other actually votes for it.
Yeah, and it goes through anyway. I mean, look, I think that they are to be admired for striking that tone of principle. It's just shocking to me that no other Republicans did so other than those 2.
Yeah, look, I wish we were in a political era where members of Congress felt more willing to break ranks over just say, you know, I support the agenda, but I don't support this person for this reason. But we're in an era where you really got to be a team player. You know, there's some breaking of ranks on foreign policy, on Epstein subjects, on Big Beautiful Bill, you know, not delivering on promises. But personnel seems to be the area where, no, you got to go along with the team. Or personnel seems to be where the kind of very moderate Republicans, the Murkowski, the vaguely never Trump, not that they're never Trump, but seem to be that they flex their muscles there, but not in a way that actually stalls things.
No, I mean,
whereas the more the kind of principled or ideological objectors to some of the things Trump does, they save it for the policy battles, not the personnel battles.
I guess I don't really accept that dichotomy, because I think whenever you say about personnel battles and it's someone like Emil Bove, to me there is a very obvious issue of principle there in installing onto the bench someone who has allegedly displayed a propensity to simply disregard the law.
Well, all right, that does it for us today on Rising Live. Thanks so much for watching, and please look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere that you can find podcasts. And I will be back here tomorrow. Will you be back here tomorrow,
I will.
Royal?
We will be reunited once again, Rob.
How about that? We'll be having a lot of fun. Stay tuned tomorrow.